So I want to take a moment to explain the basis of the more recent content I've been sharing as I've kind of transitioned away from mostly talking about narcissists and relationship dynamics to really attempting to capture the human experience, right? The most important moment in human history, in the history of mankind, was the moment in which human beings created language. The invention of words enabled this entire world to be described in such a way that we could communicate in new in really extraordinary ways. And, words are tools to describe things, to distinguish things from other things. And, as we move through time, we continue to distinguish things within our world. But there's a drawback of that when we started using words to describe ourselves, particularly during critical moments of human development, like the genesis of behaviors that were modeled to equip us in a way as to have us navigate reality, adaptive psychological mechanisms of experience that would use memories and emotions to create guardrails for behaviors that would be modeled to empower us within a evolving ecosystem, like all animals. But when we started to use language, there became a moment where, in the genesis of these psychological dynamics that became the foundational basis of an ongoing adaptive mechanism, we started to articulate ourselves in language, where we objectify human beings. Our own experience became split between the world of experience outside of ourselves and the world of understanding within our mind. And as we started to develop an understanding of ourselves, we invented the experience of ourselves within the world of our imagination. And using words to describe ourselves that were connected to powerful emotional experiences started to create and crystallize profound boundaries that became emotional impediments and limitations that we would carry and that would distinguish us from one another, that would create separateness, that would take us and encase us within profound boundaries, that when we imagine the future, we imbued ourselves with the limitations of our past in this perpetual cycle of experience that we keep recreating and bringing into the existence powerful emotions. And in many ways have imperiled ourselves as we continue to search for meaning and significance and identify ourselves through things and events outside of ourselves. And so we split our realities, where we take the inner world of our imaginary self and project it onto the outer world. And now what we're seeing the evolutionary drawback of the contamination of understanding ourselves based on past traumatic experiences and how that has affected us. And the challenge has been, as we have tried to address these experiences with the inclusion of additional words, stigmas, and diagnoses, without really understanding the implications and ramifications of the objectification process itself, that it is one of a conscious creation, that our conscious mind brought us into being by creating language that we would use to explain the circumstances of our childhood, that something bad has happened. And now we have the language to describe ourselves within that something happened, thus creating a self that thinks that it's broken, a self that thinks it's not good enough, including the world that it was broken within, the world that it was not good enough within. And now when we look out through our eyes and listen through our ears, the little voice in our mind tells us, I'm not good enough. And we sacrifice discernment and experience. And so humanity transitioned from experiential beings that merely engaged the world and had a vast imagination that empowered us to continually evolve and adapt and strategize, giving us a profound advantage over nature. And that evolutionary advantage has now become the human disadvantage, where we're doomed and destined to repeat patterns of history, patterns of our own personal histories, entombing us in perpetual despair and disconnect. And as we struggle to grapple with the meaning of life and continue to define ourselves within the paradigms of dogma, we can see the profound implications in terms of our collective mental health, where suddenly we believe that within the last few hundred years, we have all adapted some genetic deficiencies that can only be addressed through medical intervention and the modification of brain chemistries, failing to acknowledge that there have been people in existence that have found a way out of the paradigms of understanding ourselves within the limitations of a child's mind. Yet, the truth that's been described to set us free has also been mystified, made into a spiritual experience, relegated to obscurity, not getting much validity within the world of psychology, where very valid and true experiences that might have been described in Buddhism or the teachings of Jesus, have been the basis of dogma and conflict as we struggle to grapple with those individuals that were so impactful during their times, and a world in which we try to address the world of experience by trying to integrate knowledge from the world of understanding. Yet, look at how many people struggle in life. Look at how many people feel guilt and shame about the reality that we can continue to learn, continue to study psychology, continue to read books, continue to try to understand our own experiences. And then that understanding becomes the basis of more internal struggle, where we can't reconcile. Why is it that despite everything I know, despite the fact that I know better, do I keep repeating the same mistakes? Well, it's through the process of objectifying ourselves. By making ourselves into an object separate from the world, we separated ourselves from the experiential realm, and we live split between understanding and experience. Convinced that answering the questions of our ruminating mind, seeking answers for our pain, for our suffering, is somehow going to make the difference, only to figure out that it hasn't. And our books and literature continue to get thicker and thicker, with new diagnoses coming out every day simply to describe the patterns of behavior and make accurate correlations to past experiences, yet failing to understand the true genesis of the human experience. And the paradigm of the repetitive behaviors can be rooted in singular moments where human beings describe themselves for the first time in states of pain, and therefore imperiled themselves to live within the imaginary world of the imagination, projected onto reality, doomed to continue to repeat the same emotional experiences, confusing the arbitrary nature of the things happening outside of themselves as to have significance and meaning in terms of the assertion of my own worth, my own value, which is continually in flux, making us self-seeking, self-dealing validation machines, trying to chase and find the happiness we displace with our own language. And so what's needed is a transformation, a restoration from the world of understanding back to the living world of experience, where our minds and imaginations can once again give us ourselves, restore us to the true nature, the true empathy, the true connection, the true sameness that we lost when we started dividing ourselves, understanding ourselves, and individuating ourselves.